Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Questions during this chat, you can always throw them in the chat box, but you can also use the Q&A section of the AirMeet, and I will be monitoring that throughout the talk, so we'll take moments to go ahead and answer questions from there. This recording of this workshop is also broadcasting live on our YouTube channel, so if you need to come back to it, it is recorded. You can watch the whole thing, and we will be monitoring the comments there. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it there, and we'll always be able to come back to that as well. So we're really excited to get started. We have Yaz, who's from C Labs, and Marcus, who's from C Labs, and we actually have another person who we will be bringing up to the stage in the moment. We will have Ashley from Resource Network. And yeah, we're excited for them to talk about launching new currencies on Celo and the whole ecosystem as a whole. So with that, I will throw it over to, I guess, Yas, and then we can go ahead and get started. And I will pull Ashley up in a moment.
Cool. Thank you, Gloria. Yeah, so I'm Yaz. I do developer relations at Celo. I started at Celo in September. Before that, I was in Ethereum Classic and the whole Ethereum ecosystem doing developer relations. My background is engineering. I'll be the moderator and host for this panel. And we can get started by introducing Marcus. Marcus, you want to do an intro?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Yas. Thanks, Gloria. Exciting to be here. Yeah, my name is Marcus. I'm also working at C Labs. I'm an economist, therefore also working on the broader topic of platform or blockchain economics. I'm working at C Labs on Celo since 3 years now, and before that I worked as an economist my whole career. I did my PhD in economics and worked in investment banks, but also as a asset manager or portfolio manager for pension funds, and therefore, yeah, not coming from an engineering background, but really enjoying thinking about the economics behind, for example, stablecoins, what we chat about today.
Amazing. Yeah, and I can't wait to get started deep in, doing a deep dive into the whole stablecoin kind of thing going. But like while we wait for Ashley, let's talk a little bit more about you. Are you currently in, where are you located, Marcus?
I'm based in Berlin. C Labs has a larger team also based out of Berlin. We decided early on for C Labs that we should also be in Berlin. Berlin has an interesting history. It was a divided city. It had to go through many changes in the currency that was used in Berlin several times. And Berlin, of course, has a vibrant blockchain community. Many engineers from all over the world, especially all over Europe, are coming to Berlin. C Labs has an office in Kreuzberg, a funky part of Berlin, and there we have people from basically all backgrounds, like engineers, mobile engineers, but also protocol and platform engineers, and then also some people in the economics team, like me.
Yeah, and it's close to Gorley Park, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh man, like I had a lot of good memories from East Berlin and stuff, and yeah, it's one of my favorite events of the year. It's too bad, during the pandemic, nobody can travel anymore. But I'm looking forward to the next Berlin meetup and stuff. Yeah, so while we wait for Ashley to come, let's talk more about your work in stablecoin, like from a high level. Like, so what do you do at C Lab, like specifically and stuff, like in relation to stablecoin and stuff?
Yes. So I think the first project we started to work on was what we still call the stability analysis. You can, if you go to celo.org, to the white paper section, you still can find this paper, the stability analysis there, which is a simulation of many different scenarios for example, demand for stablecoin. And in that simulation, we basically simulate that part that we cannot predict, or we don't know how that turns out. And demand for stablecoin is one part. And therefore, we use different statistical processes to simulate demand for stablecoin. For example, geometric Brownian motion, Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process. We included jumps in there to basically simulate different scenarios of demand and then see in that simulation how the protocol, how the Celo blockchain reacts to these varying levels of demand. And the stability analysis informed a lot what we in the end then also built in terms of the stability protocol itself. It informed also how we would set or should set parameters in the general system. So that was the first project going into that stability analysis. And now I see we have Ashley on the line.
Yay, Ashley
welcome.
here.
Hey.
Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. Sorry about my difficulties.
No worries. We're glad to have you. So we were just going through like around an introduction. So why don't we kick it off by you introducing yourself as well.
Great. Thanks. My name is Ashley Taylor. I studied cultural anthropology, and I got interested in the developments of technology because of the impacts I saw it was going to have on culture. I was working at a think tank. It was called the Center for Planetary Culture, funded by Warren Buffett's son, Peter Buffett, and his wife, Jennifer. And we were supposed to look into the ways to engage people with climate change and inequality, because it seems like people couldn't really deal with these big issues. They were just so large in terms of their impact that people shut down. So we were looking into cultural ways to engage people. And during that time, Vitalik wrote the Ethereum white paper, and that was circulating in our think tank. And once I started to sort of understand that the idea of programmable incentive economic design was going to change everything, I decided it was really important to be involved in that for people like me who had, a cultural background, a more social impact background. So at the time, I met Joseph Lubin, and he was, talking about Ethereum, talking about a for-profit company called Consensus. So I said, that sounds cool. Joined that early on, the first employee, and helped build out that organization. And decided that a lot of the things that I was really interested in were very early in terms of applications for everyday people. So I decided to get involved with doing some more like regulatory consulting just to see how the technology can go wrong, if I was also interested in how it can be designed in the right way. And I also developed a community space in New York called the Regenerative Resource Network to get a more on-the-ground understanding of community organizing and issues. And recently got introduced to David Casey, who had this idea for resource and community exchange, and it was super similar to the concept that I had always been interested in and tried in different ways with blockchain, and we'll get more into what we're doing there.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a great little, I had no idea that, you started off with Joe Lubin and Consensus. It's so fascinating and stuff. We already, from a high level, what I want to know is, before we start getting deeper into Resource Network and stablecoins and stuff, what do you do currently at Resource Network?
Sure thing. So I'm a co-founder, so we're all trying to make this organization happening. Right now, we're doing a lot of fundraising. We're kind of halfway through our seed round. But my big interest is in compliance, governance, and business development, which really translates to partnerships with other protocols and other communities long-term who want to build their own mutual credit application on our network.
Amazing. Well, that sounds so exciting. I can't wait to like delve deeper into the details. All right. Okay. So we have a great panel so far. A lot of exciting topics. We can get started and start talking about Celo. And so, Marcus, I want to kick it off by talking about Celo, as a place that we keep talking about Celo for stablecoins, right? Like it's the best place to have stablecoin. But what I want to dive into is like, what are the features of Celo that makes it really attractive for stablecoins?
Yeah, sure. And please stop me if like answering this will take too long, or if I should go into a different direction. But in the end, a stablecoin, there's no like standard definition of what a stablecoin would be. In the end, a stablecoin has or combines the classic features of cryptocurrencies, but also wants to stabilize its price by linking its value or tracking some underlying asset. And this underlying asset could be, for example, a fiat currency. And stablecoin in the end emerged because other crypto assets basically didn't serve the functions of money being a easy medium of exchange or a good store of value too good. So many currencies are just too volatile for day-to-day transactions, but also many currencies are not easy to transfer, maybe also not very fast for small transfers, and therefore basically stablecoins came up. And one of the nice features of the Celo platform is that they have the feature of embedded stablecoins. Embedded stablecoins means they are like part of the smart contract layer of the Celo blockchain. And this has then the big advantage that, for example, gas fees can be paid in multiple currencies. So stablecoins on Celo, if you send, for example, Celo dollar, which was the first stablecoin that existed on Celo, you can pay for gas fees also in Celo dollar, which makes it then already much more usable because you don't need to have a second currency, and that for gas, and this second currency basically then would maybe be again volatile, which makes it very hard for especially for small transactions. And therefore having this feature that you can pay your transaction fees that are very low on Celo in the same currency as you sent your transaction is already very useful. So if you send Celo dollar, you can pay in Celo dollar for gas, and this fee is super low. If you send in future a transaction in the next stablecoin that will be launched on Celo in cEUR, then you could also pay the transaction fee in cEUR. But then the nice thing is that Celo basically combines this embedded stablecoin with the advantage of being compatible to Ethereum, to the Ethereum virtual machine. So Celo also enables smart contracts, and therefore you could have conditional payments, you could have lending and borrowing on top of Celo with these stablecoins. And even more, and there's probably also a huge part, or especially also of this hackathon and of this event here, is Celo is a mobile-first blockchain, and it enables very fast sync, very fast transactions that needs much lower amounts of data than other chains, and therefore is optimized for the use on mobile. And I think, or we think, that this is where a lot of adoption can come from. If you have a stable currency that is easily transferred, that can be used on a low-end mobile phone, that settles very, very fast, and that is very cheap to transfer, then you basically bring together all these advantages in one product. And therefore, I think Celo blockchain is a perfect blockchain for hosting different stable currencies.
Amazing. It's like it combines like the whole gas, cheaper gas with like a mobile first approach. It like makes it stablecoin that are also accessible to a lot of people, users and stuff. I want to take that, while we're talking about Celo, I want to take it to Ashley. I know we haven't dived deep into the resource network and what it does, but I'm kind of curious, I guess, what's like cheaper gas fees and a mobile first approach? Is that one of the main attractive features that, helped your team decide to move or migrate to Celo to begin with? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that falls within the bucket of designing for people who aren't necessarily going to be able to have the time to do the work to understand the technology behind this and what they need to do in terms of key management and things like that. So definitely was a big decision-making process for us. Also in terms of like migrating to Celo, I mean, we talk about this a lot, like we're so grateful that we're on a platform that we don't put it out into the wild and then it's going to be like DeFi casino people trying to like immediately do things that we don't want done. And especially if you think about our use case, like we're serving businesses who really don't have a knowledge of crypto. So we don't really want to expose them to a bunch of the volatile risks that a lot of people in the space are, maybe more comfortable with. So yeah, and the mobile first thing, I mean, we're not totally there yet either. I think like towards the later part of the year, we want to develop an actual application, and then
like a DeFi casino for a lot of people and stuff like that. We want to do social impact, things that are meaningful, that can actually help a lot of people around the world using these technology that is really cutting edge and stuff. So now, Marcus, you spoke about like the stable coins and stuff. So from what I understand, there's three different types of stablecoin that currently exist as a model, right? Like in Ethereum, everywhere else. Like there's one that is like fiat collateralized, which I believe USDT is, and then there's crypto-backed stablecoins like DAI, which is backed by Ethereum, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's the seigniorage style stablecoin, which are like algorithmically controlled depending on what is demand and stuff like that. So I'm kind of curious, where does Celo dollar and Celo euro as well, what kind of category would they fall into, if they do at all?
Yeah, great question. And on these categories you mentioned, like the fiat-backed stablecoins like USDC, USDT, the crypto-collateralized like DAI, the seigniorage share stablecoins, they all have like different, of course, like advantages and disadvantages, but you could look at them from the governance perspective, from a transparency perspective, from a stability perspective, from a risk perspective. And with the fiat-backed, and there's probably nothing new for this audience, the governance here is more centralized because there is a central institution that holds the fiat. The transparency, therefore, is a bit different because this institution, if it's, for example, a bank, it has to be audited if the collateral is actually there. But even more, in economics, there's a lot of literature around counterparty risk, and the counterparty risk and the possibility of a bank run that has to be evaluated in some sense, which is probably the biggest risk of these fiat-backed stablecoins. You have to be able to audit if the collateral is in place, and to price this stablecoin, you would need to evaluate the counterparty risk of that institution that holds the stablecoin. And therefore, these other types of stablecoins emerged, like crypto-collateralized or seigniorage share stablecoins, because from a governance perspective, they are decentralized. From a transparency perspective, they are typically smart contract-based and therefore much more easier to verify and to audit if the stablecoin is actually doing what it is promising to do. And therefore, from a risk perspective, there are different risks that could lie in the design of the smart contracts. But it's from a transparency perspective easier, at least, to evaluate this risk. With crypto-collateralized stablecoins, they typically have one crypto collateral, like, for example, DAI has ETH. And the difference with Celo being somehow a hybrid between a crypto collateralized stablecoin and a programmatic seniorage share type of stablecoin is that Celo has this programmatic expansion and contraction protocol. So the main feature of Celo dollar and in future Celo euro, Celo peso, Celo yen, and other currencies that we hopefully see in future on Celo is that the price is kept stable by adjusting the supply of stablecoin so that it matches the demand of stablecoin. If there's more demand, the supply should go up. If there's less demand, the supply should go down. And actually, every user is incentivized to expand and contract of the supply of stablecoin. To back this up, especially for contractions, there's also a reserve in place. And with Celo, this reserve is made up of its own seniorage type token, which is also the governance token, which is Celo native asset that allows you to take part in governance, allows you to stake, but also allows you to basically expand and contract the amount of Celo dollars and Celo euros. But there are also other assets in that reserve. All assets in that reserve should be based on a blockchain so that the reserve is also transparent and so that this reserve in future can also be rebalanced fully automatic. So yeah, comparing Celo stablecoins, I would say it's a best of this worlds of being crypto collateralized, but still linking supply and demand via this programmatic feature.
It sounds like you're saying this hybrid model might be superior to everything else that we know out there, right?
I mean, superior is always difficult to say. I think every model has its ups and downs. But the crypto collateralized, I mean, you have this very transparent design. Maybe one downside of this crypto collateralized feature in DAI, for example, is that there's not always a direct link between supply and demand of DAI. Because the supply sometimes depends on how many people want to leverage their ETH holdings and therefore leverage them within a CDP to mint DAI. And it also depends on, for example, the value of ETH, and if all the DAI or all the CDPs are called, the supply of DAI would go down, even though it could be that the demand is still at the same level. So this might be a feature that could be tricky. Another feature that could be tricky is that you would have to pay for gas fees in a different currency, but this is a different story.
Yeah.
With the Celo protocol, maybe the downside is with these like combination of features, a best of, it is also a more complex design. I mean, in the end, the easiest design is a fiat-backed stablecoin, because if it would really work, if everyone could verify fiat is in place, then that would be a very easy way to link a coin to the underlying fiat. It's very easy to understand. The more features and the more smart contracts you have to build out, the more complex the system gets. But basically, we're trying to say, or I'm thinking about it, it is a best of two worlds, while still being fully transparent, fully decentralized.
Amazing. Yeah. It's all about, like in engineering, we like to say it's all about trade-offs, right? And so it's like, what kind of different features are about trade-offs. I want to take it back to Ashley. Ashley, let's talk about, what Resource Network is doing and stuff. And like, I know from like, like a high level, the focus is on mutual credits, right? So I want you to maybe we can start, take it off by, going over what you're all building and stuff with mutual credit, and we can take it from there.
Sure. So you can think about our network as a way that a stablecoin is created when a business in our network finds a service from another business and basically sends them some of our stable coin. And then that essentially mints the money into existence when they find the service they need. Now they have a negative balance, and we've actually implemented this as a negative balance ERC20. And then the business that they sent money to has a positive balance. The cool thing about our system is there was no cryptocurrency, no fiat that was locked in a box to mint the coin. It was essentially minted from the business being found trustworthy enough for their future goods and services that they can provide to the network. And then the person who now has the positive balance basically now trusts that they can find something within our network. So we didn't come up with this idea. Mutual credit is not a novel concept. It's actually been used in a bunch of different ways. If the most maybe well-known successful example is called the Veer Bank in Switzerland, and it came about during the Great Depression, which is very interesting because that's very analogous to the time that we're entering or are already in today. But it stayed around because people see that it's another way for them to increase transactions, find people to trade with, and basically diversify the types of marketing, sales channels, and community network that you have. The new thing we are doing is putting that on a blockchain. And so, of course, people here understand what that means. It means interoperability between different mutual trade currency networks, which we think will, over time, become a more interesting way for businesses to want to trade. Another thing to mention about our system is we're focusing on business-to-business trade because everybody in that network is a buyer and a seller. We believe really strongly that these types of systems are so sort of strange for people to wrap their heads around. So you really need to get adoption with them in a way that is like slow and gradual, but then you can slowly build a network effect.
Amazing, yeah, and like you mentioned that it's basically like on resource, it's like a stable coin, but like the way it's issued, it's not crypto backed or fiat backed. It's based on trust. So I'm guessing like it's kind of like if you're applying with a bank for a loan and stuff, there's a trust that you'd be able to pay back that loan. I guess that's similar to what you guys are doing in a way.
Yeah, and I can talk about basically creditworthiness. So I kind of described sort of like the system in its pure form, but then of course, if we think about putting that out in the wild, we want to make sure that the people that are joining the network are basically good for what they say that they're going to be good for. So we have a tiered approach to that. First, we're going to start with literally physical ambassadors who are actually going to businesses in the city we're launching in Asheville, North Carolina, starting in April. And they're going to verify this place has customers. They're going to physically see them, and they're also probably going to know them in the first place. The second layer of creditworthiness that we'll implement for people that we don't know, that ambassadors don't know, is what are your sharing economy or Google review or Yelp review websites look like, right? If you have like 100 reviews on there and they're all pretty good, that says a lot about your creditworthiness in terms of, product market fit, things like this. The third stage that we'll go to when we really get to the point where, people want to join that ambassadors don't know them, we can connect using bank account APIs, and we can actually start to implement some of the more, tried and true systems from the legacy system. But the final phase of that, it gets to a point where we can decentralize the ability to validate creditworthiness. Something that I'm very excited about is businesses on the network can essentially then be able to say, I know this business, I know they're good for it. And I haven't talked about our tokenomics, but they're essentially going to be able to stake to validate creditworthiness as well as people who want to play more of a professional underwriter role on our protocol. And one thing I should mention is, okay, so then I said all these things about, financial inclusion, and we're wanting people who don't understand crypto. And then I said staking. How are the businesses going to know how to stake? So every business on our network who does a transaction, buy or sell, so, both parties meet in the middle, both of them get issued some of our governance token at that moment. So once that sort of gets understood, they'll already have the currency that they can then, or the token that they can then stake to validate other businesses to bring onto the network.
Amazing. Yeah, super exciting stuff.
we have some questions. First off, the whole aspect of credit worthiness was just going off in the chat, so like that was really fascinating. But we have some questions in the Q&A. Do you mind taking one or two?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What's the first question? Is there an easy on-ramping for token stablecoin development on Celo for those of us who have less technical skill? I guess that's the question for Marcus and for Ashley, feel free to dive in. But I guess from a stablecoin perspective, what I've seen with Celo Euro, the CIP33, which was the specification, there was a specific proposal. How do we do analysis from an economic point of view in order to introduce a secondary stablecoin asset and stuff? Maybe you can expand on that, Marcus.
Yes, and we are currently putting this in place and putting this together in writing so that we can also share it in the forum a bit more broad, how we would think about building future stable coins on Celo, and what other currencies should there be on Celo, and how the community should think about these in the end. And maybe then afterwards, yes, you could also talk a bit about the governance, how it works itself, and who could propose new currencies, and basically how the whole process works. But in general, the core mission is to build a financial system that creates conditions of prosperity for everyone. Therefore, it is around financial inclusion, and each additional stable asset that the community launches should contribute to this objective of enabling more people, more geographies in the world to build on Celo. So it should be basically about in the end about the ecosystem and enabling the ecosystem to build great things on top of Celo, and these stablecoins could help here. So the different factors you should consider when the community decides about a new stablecoin to be added would be: is this new currency aligned with this mission? Does it basically provide greater accessibility or participation? Is the market that this new currency would reach, is this a relevant market? And relevant doesn't mean it has to be a huge market. It just has to, it means from an ecosystem perspective, would it enable more ecosystem player to build on top of Celo and use this currency? So for example, after Celo Euro, because we saw a lot of demand of projects to build on top of Celo from Europe, we currently have, for example, a very active ecosystem in, for example, Brazil and many other markets in the world. So maybe you could think about Celo Real being a future, Brazilian Real being a future currency. So basically having also in that market an active ecosystem that would use this currency. And you also have to think about, when building a stablecoin, about inflation. Is the currency you would like to link to a high inflationary currency? Maybe it would make more sense to link to something else. That's a nice thing about Celo. You could link to different things. You could also link to a basket of goods in a certain country if this country has huge inflation due to different reasons in its fiat currency, and therefore maybe it would make sense to link to something else. But of course, in the beginning, when building out an ecosystem like this, you also have to think about liquidity. Are there marketplaces in this country? Is there a way how we could get the currency there? Are there mobile phone users in this country? Fortunately, more and more people have access to mobile phones, and therefore this should work. And then probably also an aspect here is regulation. I'm not a lawyer, but in certain legal environments, it's probably not the best environment to launch. On the other hand, it is fully decentralized, so you can basically build anything on top of Celo.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. My background, like my family back in the Mediterranean, like they've been exposed to a lot of inflation and stuff with their life saving and stuff. So like compliance is super important when you target countries in emerging markets and stuff that are, where the citizen might be subject to increasing inflation. So that's like, something that to consider. In Canada, I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but like basically we can also link to the CIP 33, which has like a specification. We want to do more work around just how to start a stablecoin kind of kit around just like what are the things to consider and stuff like that. But if you also want to mint a regular token, the good thing about Celo, it's EVM compatible. So the same way you would mint an ERC20 on Ethereum, the same thing applies to Celo. So that should that's already like a good advantage with using Celo and stuff. Ashley, is there anything you want to add? I guess maybe like what about I guess from your perspective and stuff, how it has been I know you guys migrated over from Ethereum to Celo. How is that like migration and stuff, especially when it comes to issuing a token and stuff like that? And if there's any advice you would give to other people who want to do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the time is now because it's still sort of young in Celo's history for blockchain. And for us, I think, to reiterate the point earlier, like we feel safer to release something there, especially for something that, when you look at a lot of projects that launch in blockchain and they have to deal with a lot of attacks, right? Like we feel very more comfortable with the community here in Celo, so releasing there, we feel comfortable in that way. And then of course, like our devs are just excited to be part of a community that feels aligned and isn't always about win token, like all this sort of speculation in terms of the people that we're interacting with on the Discord. And our experience on a sort of community level has also been that when we have questions, we have answers right away. Like there's a lot of early stage community building kind of energy that's still present there. That I also remember from Ethereum, back in the day before it became such a widely used, more distributed platform in the sense of so many other projects are using it. So I think because of that, early on, it's really nice. But I think really our long-term vision of the types of things that we're doing in terms of credit building and financial inclusion and emerging markets, like that's more of our, long-term partnership that we see with Celo, because there's so many projects that are already building here that we just see such a natural partnership synergy. So I think we're really gearing up for that like long-term relationship and excited to be part of the community building that's going to attract other projects to develop here and develop in a way that makes sense for a regular person rather than sort of a fintech gaming theory kind of person.
Amazing, thank you. So we had another question in Canada, but I'm the creator of Black Magic. My project aims at interfacing DeFi with the everyday person. What are your thoughts on how we can connect these two groups? My advice to you, you might find a really friendly guy in the chat called Jarrell. I suggest you connect with him. And then we can take it on, about how we can work together. So, so let's see what other questions we have. Marcus, I had a question because you talked about the Celo Reserve. Right now, from what I understand, for the Celo Reserve, we have Ethereum, DAI, Bitcoin, and I believe is Celo part of the Celo Reserve? Yeah.
Yes.
So we have those two different tokens. Let's say if I'm Polkadot or I'm Zcash or something, and I want to add those assets to the Celo Reserve. Is there any kind of consideration that we need to do in order to facilitate that?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is following. In the end, the reserve itself has different functions, and therefore there are different dimensions to that answer. So one function of the reserve, of course, is stability. So it should stabilize. It should be a stable reserve for stablecoins, and therefore either stable or growing. And with every asset that is not perfectly correlated to the assets that are already in the reserve, you basically diversify the risk of this reserve. However, there's also the transparency function of the reserve. The reserve should be fully transparent, and therefore an asset should live on a blockchain, and therefore it should be verifiable to every user that this asset is actually in place to collateralize stable coins out there. There's also the decentralization dimension. So with, for example, Bitcoin and ETH, they're already, especially with ETH projects that build bridges between the Celo blockchain and Ethereum blockchain. So you could then think how basically this decentralization feature could be catered by these bridges, and therefore if other blockchains would like to be a part of the Celo reserve, it would make sense to work on a bridge so that basically the Celo community then also sees a lot of value in that asset that is added to the reserve. But another dimension I also would like to mention is the Celo blockchain is a carbon negative blockchain, which is very nice. But also the Celo reserve should be very efficient or good for the environment. Therefore, we are thinking about also what would it look like if we could add nature-backed assets to the reserve. From a diversification perspective, this is great because nature-backed assets could have very different risks and risk factors than all these other correlated blockchain assets. So if people out there are thinking about tokenizing nature-backed assets in a very decentralized and in a very transparent fashion, please reach out to me. We would really like to see more happening in that area. Because the nice thing is with these nature-backed assets, if you think about this picture, and also Sepp, one of the founders, also talks about this picture. If you think about adding trees to the reserve and the reserve growing because there's a lot of demand of stablecoin and therefore the reserve is growing, this would mean you would also need more trees in the reserve, and therefore it is like a demand of this reserve for trees or carbon credit or land that is good for the environment. And with this demand, also the value of trees or carbon credit would increase, and therefore the Celo reserve then would have a very positive impact on the environment as well. And if then this reserve would also increase in value, you could add even more things and link these things together, like UBI considerations and so on. And therefore, adding other assets to the reserve is important. We have to think about transparency, about decentralization, about stability, and this is the way how the reserve also in future should evolve.
Yeah, I get goosebumps every time I think about if we have forests as part of the reserve and demand for the stablecoin increases, we're conserving the environment by adding more forests to the reserve, and it's a very remarkable kind of idea and stuff, and I would love to see it happen. So I want to touch up. We have a bit of time. I want to touch up on governance and stuff. So. Marcus, you mentioned governance, as part of the stablecoin issuance and stuff like that. So our governance process, first what we did was, for example, with cEUR, we issued a specification for analysis and stuff what cEUR would look like. And then once we accepted this as a standard, we started working on Celo governance proposal, issuing governance for all the community members to vote in. Not like the proposal itself, but the activation and minting of the cEUR itself. And currently, right now, it's on chain right now, the governance proposal, and voting starts super soon, probably by today. So I recommend everyone to check it out. But while we're talking about governance, Ashley, you mentioned governance as well for the resource network. So how is resource network thinking about governance and stuff for your specific protocol?
So we're going with a model of progressive decentralization. So I mentioned that we're launching our network in Asheville, North Carolina next month in April. Every business that transacts earns a little of our governance token. We think that's really cool because it's not just people who are doing things in more of like a tokenomics perspective behind the scene that are earning our governance token. It's also the users of the platform who are, non-techie, regular Main Street type of businesses. We are also taking an approach of not over-designing governance before we have the community. And I think that that's really important because I remember very early on in blockchain, a lot of the discussions about, how governance is going to work in the future when all these people are going to be using the technology. And I realized that early thinking was going to be sort of over designing, over specification of systems without really understanding how people are going to use this and how they want to interact it. So I think what's going to be cool is that we're going to, onboard businesses, we're going to develop the governance token, issue the governance token, and then we'll start to sort of understand in what ways would people like to play a role. Is it things about transaction fees? Is it things about interest that goes for people who are staking, which basically is insuring debt on the platform? Is it things like, launching new networks that people want to be involved in? So that's kind of version 1 of this year. We launched the network first, then we launched sort of the protocol that governs this network, but then also other future networks. Something that we're exploring now, that we're realizing that we're going to have multiple different mutual credit networks using the same protocol and the same infrastructure and the same governance token. We're realizing that we may need to have a secondary governance token for some of the networks that want to be, more in the decentralized camp. Of course, someone could launch a network on our protocol and do it as more of sort of a traditional business using our software. And maybe they don't want to have the secondary governance token, but we definitely know that there's going to be people, and probably ourselves will want to play a role in helping develop this sort of secondary governance token. And then, not to get too far in the future, but of course there then is a way for that secondary governance token to then be exchanged or used to sort of create exchanges between the different networks. But I think this year is really going to be about sort of developing that initial governance layer for the protocol.
Yeah, that's super cool. We're currently, we've done a lot of governance processes at Celo as well. And now we're in the midst of actually, I agree with you that you shouldn't, start by over-engineering the governance process. What we're seeing right now for us, having done governance for like the past year and stuff, we're now at a point where we want to add a little bit more engineering to it because we feel like it might be a little bit underspecified. So I'm going to be hosting in a couple of weeks the community call. Anyone is welcome to come and see how we can overhaul the whole governance process or just expand on it. So anyone listening, you're more than welcome to join the call. I'll post about it later. We have 5 minutes left. I want us to go over the Q&A question. Let's see. Yeah, so Josh, the session on governance, we have what we call the Celo signal. Let me just pull it up for you. So we have a newsletter, and it's the best way to keep in touch with everything happening in governance and validators and all that network core community kind of stuff. It's called Celo Signal. If you go to that link, there's a sign up button somewhere, and it'll keep you up to date on everything. All right, next question. Alex asking, how important is the ease back and forth conversion between CUSD and USD or any local currency? Should it be encouraged or discouraged? I guess your question is cash in, cash out, or I guess the conversion between fiat and CUSD. I think we have a few specific exchanges. I believe, Marcus, correct me if I'm wrong, CoinList is one of them, but do you want to expand on that question, Marcus?
Yeah, happy to. And in the end, cash-in, cash-out features are, of course, important. While we would like to see in the end that basically you don't need these features anymore because it's much easier to do the transaction all on-chain, especially now to see adoption, you need cash-in, cash-out solutions. For example, if you would like to purchase goods with a stablecoin, most probably most local stores still have to pay taxes in fiat, still have to pay their suppliers in fiat, and therefore there need to be solutions for cash in, cash out. The only way it works is in the end, again, building something permissionless, building something open source, so that basically you find enough partners that help with these solutions. If you, for example, look at the Alliance for Prosperity on Celo, a set of currently, I think, 140 mission-aligned organizations that help with bringing Celo currencies to the target markets and target audiences. They also can help with cash-in, cash-out solutions. And if you look at Valora app, for example, there are first cash-in, cash-out solutions, but in the end, we would like to encourage more in that direction, because this is something that is important and needed.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, I'm finally being able. It's like really small. Seeing the upvote number, and it's so microscopic. But I'm just gonna start asking, answering the question based on the upvote. But so Felipe had a question: What interoperability bridges Celo 8 between Celo, ETH, or any other L2 solutions are available? What is the current status of those? I believe there's a Celo Ethereum bridge, it's at least it's on the table, but I believe we also have other bridges that we're working on. I believe there's one with Cosmos, one with the Keep network in order to get TBTC. We announced the TBTC announcement, but an Ethereum Celo bridge is definitely something we want. I personally want to advocate more for it. And when it comes to layer 2 solution, the cool thing about Celo, the fact that it's EVM based, EVM compatible, means that all the L2 solutions, whether it's Connects or Optimism or stuff, any of them, they would in theory be compatible. Rollups would be compatible with Celo. So optimistic rollups is something I'm really interested in, and stay tuned for the future. Maybe we might be working on something related to that. All right, let's see all the other upvotes. It's Rafat. Is CUSD planned to be on Ethereum in order to be able to swap between different popular stablecoin, USDT, USDC, DAI? I'm not 100% on CUSD, but I know we have WCelo, Wrap Celo on Ethereum.
And also WCUSD.
Okay. Oh, amazing. Yeah. So we do have both of them on Ethereum and stuff, and you can use them with Uniswap, but they're wraps, or they're the W ticker, WCUSD and WCelo is on them.
There's one with 4 upvotes. Can you touch on the idea that greater adoption of stablecoins leads to the native asset rising in value due to the programmatic nature of the reserve? Maybe also really quick on this one. Celo native asset, or Celo, has different functions. It is the governance and utility asset on Celo. It allows you to stake. You can earn staking rewards. You can take part in governance. You can vote for validators, and it is part of the reserve. So every expansion of Celo dollar is done via Celo native asset, and therefore there's a very direct link between demand for Celo dollar and demand for Celo native asset. So this on-chain exchange that exists on Celo is called Mento, and it always allows you to exchange one Celo dollar for $1 worth of Celo, and in future there's the same exchange allows you to exchange Celo euro and Celo, and therefore you have this very direct link between the demand for stablecoin and also the demand for Celo native asset.
Great. I think we're at time.
First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to answer the questions. For those who still have questions, from this discussion and want to talk post this workshop, I'm going to go ahead and drop the Discord channel, the Celo Discord channel, in the chat. And that's a really great place to connect with people as well and ask questions too, and let you be able to take this conversation offline. I think a lot of the pieces of this conversation was stuff that I would encourage you all to continue talking offline, because there are so many great discussions to be had, and it affects so many different people. So yeah, please continue to ask questions there, and continue to ask questions throughout this hackathon. You can also ask questions in Town Square, and we will connect you to people as well. With that, I will say thank you to both Marcus, Yaz, and Ashley for your time and for your insights. It was extremely helpful, extremely insightful, and there's a lot of really great concepts there. There's great things to launch a project around as well. So hopefully the audience has their wheels turning, and they are ready to kind of go out and do some building and think deeper on some of these thoughts. So, again, this talk is recorded. You can find it on our YouTube channel, and if you want to go back and kind of research some of these topics, or reach out to Marcus, if maybe you all will take a moment to tell us where can we reach out to you if we want to find more, that'd be helpful.
Sorry, what are you asking? I got cut off for a second.
That's okay. I was saying, where can we reach out to you if we want to find out more?
Yeah. So on Discord, the link on Discord allowed you to enter Discord and just tag me. I'm Yaz, Y-A-Z. On Twitter, my DMs are open for anything related to, anything related to Celo. You have any question about it, I'm more than happy. We can just, even low-key talk about anything and stuff. So just reach out to me and stuff in DM. My email is clabs.co as well, so feel free to shoot me an email. A lot of different ways we can sync.
Perfect. Ashley, how about for you?
Yeah, I'll drop my email in the chat, and I'll also drop our Discord link for the resource network and protocol.
Awesome, thank you.
And I did the same.
Perfect. Y'all are right on the money. All right, again, thank you for your time, and that concludes our session, and we'll talk back to you and see you in Town Square.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.